So what would happen if aliens invaded, say, well, tomorrow? Well, today we've got plenty of theories about what could happen, ranging from UK plans to how countries would cooperate or not, and more. So let's get ourselves prepared in case it does happen. So for starters, if the aliens only invaded like one country, such as the good old US of A, could we possibly rely on other countries for help? Well, in a recent essay on great power competition and climate change, Rob Litwack, an arms control expert at the Wilson Center, recalled a question that President Ronald Reagan proposed to Mikhail Gorbachev, the Soviet leader, after they took a walk during their 1985 Lake Geneva summit. As Mikhail put it later, President Reagan suddenly said to me, "What would you do if the United States were suddenly attacked by someone from outer space? Would you help us?" And he was like, "Yeah, no doubt about it." He's like, "We too." So that was interesting. Good to know that things were collaborative at the time. And it's kind of fascinating because it's not all clear, given that the recent upsurge in raw great power competition that, well, if you looked at places like Russia, China, America, would we really help one another in the face of an invasion of space aliens threatening us all? Now, the point in retelling that past story, of course, is that today we're actually facing a lot of similar world-stressing threats, not from space aliens, but from a much more familiar and benign, well, once benign source. Our climate. Global warming is challenging every nation with more extreme weather, wildfires, sea level rise, and once-in-a-century storms coming much more frequently. Unlike with a space alien though, you can't really negotiate with Mother Nature. She only does whatever chemistry, biology, and physics dictate. And she has no clue or interest in where the borders of any country stop and start. So there's never really a good time for a great power conflict. And we've already seen how deadly the lack of global cooperation in the face of Mother Nature's, crazy last couple of years. In a 2011 paper for the Royal Society on Supra-Earth Affairs, former UNUSA director Mazlan Othman proposed that the interest of countries in combating the dangers of near-Earth objects, asteroids, could offer a model for international cooperation if the existence of extraterrestrial life or intelligence is ever established. With little in the way of agreed principles about how we could collectively treat any extraterrestrials we encounter, one approach could be simply applying the rights granted to humans. Fitting this into existing legal framework would make sense. It's a reasonable assumption that any species that could travel to Earth would be of a high level of intelligence and sentience, and therefore should be treated akin to humans. So this could support a case for human rights to evolve into sentient rights. Look, we should all be grateful that we don't yet have any, evidence of contact with alien civilizations. Okay, according to the government. Attempting to communicate with extraterrestrials, if they do exist, could actually be extremely dangerous for us. We need to figure out whether it's wise or safe, and how to handle such attempts in an organized manner. Some scientific circles have already been debating questions around whether to try and contact other civilizations. It's a topic of profound importance for the entire planet. For 60 years, scientists have been searching with radio telescopes, listening in for possible signals coming from other civilizations on planets orbiting distant stars. The search for aliens has reached a stage of technological sophistication and associated risk that it needs strict regulation at national and international levels. Without oversight, even one person with access to powerful transmitting technology could take actions affecting the future of the entire planet. That's because any aliens we ultimately encounter will likely be far more technologically advanced than we are. For a simple reason, most stars in our galaxy are much older than the sun. If civilizations arise fairly frequently on some planets, then there ought to be many civilizations in our galaxy millions of years more advanced than our own. Many of these would likely have taken significant steps to begin exploring and possibly colonizing the galaxy. So, invasion time! So back in 2017, The Sun asked British experts what would happen if aliens invaded, and they painted a terrifying portrait that included mass evacuations, emergency war cabinets, and a frenzied every man for themselves mentality among the masses. Which, not great. It's hard to say exactly what would go down if aliens invaded Earth, because technically it hasn't happened yet, depending on who you ask. Maybe it might never happen. So The Sun picked the brains of a former Ministry of Defense insider and a top paranormal investigator to work out what the most likely scenario would be. So picture this. You're sitting at home, watching TV, and your show is interrupted for a public service announcement. A broadcaster utters the words, "The Prime Minister has drawn up an emergency war cabinet, will be briefed immediately regarding reports of a possible alien invasion." So a Cobra meeting, which is the UK's equivalent of the Situation Room, will have already been called. So Nick Pope, former Ministry of Defense UFO advisor, believes key players would include the Secretary of State for Defense, the Chief of Defense Staff, and the government chief scientist. So there would be an emergency alert, the same kind you get for a missing person or for a crazy level of crime near you, the annoying blaring ones that you can't just turn off. So the advice would be to take cover. at home if possible, and await further instructions from the authorities. Yeah, maybe those doomsday shelters aren't a bad idea after all. There are no international agreements or mechanisms in place for how humanity would handle an encounter with extraterrestrial intelligence. This is according to Nicholas Hedman, Executive Director of the UN Office for Outer Space Affairs. So that's not to say a framework could never exist. The UN, as the prime global intergovernmental organization, would be a fit for such mechanisms. But ultimately, action and debate boils down to the will of member states. So currently, all international space law relates to human activity. The first outer space treaty was signed through the UN in 1967 by the UK, the Soviet Union, and the US in response to the development of intercontinental ballistic missiles, which could reach targets in space. It serves as the basis for all existing space law, which has developed over time as new possibilities and concerns around space emerged. Now, all 5 of the major space treaties, which now cover everything from, the prohibition of weapons through to liability for damage and debris from spacefaring nations, center around what humans do in space and how this affects other humans. The Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence group at the International Academy of Astronautics did adopt a post-detection framework in 2010, building on decades of prior debate. In the case of any detection of signals from intelligent extraterrestrial life, this recommends creating a forum for international coordination through the UN and its Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space. Experts believe it's unlikely any widely accepted international framework will be developed until it needs to be. People like having material, real-life scenarios to consider in order to bring new ideas into law. Should contact happen, it's possible that the existing legal frameworks that govern human rights could be extended and adapted to those of aliens. One major consideration in this case would be the intent of the aliens. In short, whether they're benign or hostile. This feeds into the debate over whether we should be actively attempting to contact extraterrestrials or passively looking for signals of their existence, which is an ongoing contentious question among experts. And lastly for today, what if aliens are already trying to communicate with us? And by that, I mean what if they've been trying for years and we just haven't been able to understand their communications? So nearly 40 years ago, radio astronomer Jerry Ammon was scanning a part of the sky hoping to detect a signal from an alien civilization. Well, all of a sudden, he picked something up. The signal was incredibly short, just a burst, but it registered as a distinct spike, a sort of momentary broadcast. And on a printout, he circled the blip in red pen and wrote out one word: wow! So this signal became known as the WOW signal, and it's never been explained, and nothing quite like it has ever been heard again. So an organization called the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, or the SETI Institute, has continued listening for signals that might be created by intelligent life forms out there in the galaxy and beyond. So what happened if they heard such a signal? How would it confirm the broadcast really was sent to us by aliens? A new Science Channel documentary has explained how astronauts on the Apollo 10 mission heard strange space music in their earphones when orbiting on the far side of the moon. Now, many scientists believe the cause to be simply radio interference. However, this documentary has raised the question of how we are able to distinguish one space sound from another in our search for a sign of life. Hearing something and discounting it is highly regular, according to Dr. John Elliott at a university in the UK. Stuff that gets to the post-detection task group is rare. So SETI's post-detection task group is a small council of scientists primed to analyze interesting radio signals detected by radio telescopes around the world. Dr. Elliott is a member, and he spent a lot of time thinking about what would happen if we did hear an alien broadcast. Like, he's been involved with this organization since 1999, and in that time the task group has only had to evaluate one signal every couple of years or so. There's detections daily, but they're pretty quickly written off. Reports could come from anywhere. There's even a whole network of volunteers with their own receivers, keeping an ear out for evidence. Now, it's unlikely we'd know what aliens were actually saying to us immediately, but we might be able to work out if they were saying something. So SETI keeps a list of every candidate signal, and there's even a system in place for ranking characteristics, how it was detected, where it originated. Any interesting signals would be made widely public, but it's only after a very strict procedure of verification's been carried out. There's even a special list of protocols for such an event. And that's it for me once again, folks. I've been Alexa, your resident ookie spooky girly. See y'all next time, you lovely spooky people.